A very good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us at this late hour for this special media briefing on the occasion of the visit of the Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Kishida Fumio, for the annual summit. Just to give us a sense of where we have the privilege with us to have Foreign Secretary Sir Shri Harshvardhan Shringla. We also have with us our ambassador to Japan, Shri Sanjay Kumar Verma, as well as Additional Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs looking after the East Asia Division, Naveen Srivastav, sir. And I would request Foreign Secretary, sir, to make an opening remarks, and then we'll take a few questions.
Let me begin by thanking our friends from the media for being patient with us. Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Mr. Kishida Fumio, is on an official visit to India. This is the invitation of the Prime Minister, and he is here for the 14th India-Japan Annual Summit. We have just finished our bilateral engagements, including delegation-level talks. Let me start by running you through the program, giving you an idea of the discussions, and then we can briefly talk about the outcomes, the agreements emanating from the summit. But before anything else, I'll try and give you a sense of an appreciation of why the summit was significant. You are aware, of course, that our relations with Japan have always occupied a special place. It is one of the few countries with which India has a system of annual summits, and as I mentioned, this is the 14th summit that is taking place. In 2014, Prime Minister Modi made his first bilateral visit outside India's immediate neighborhood to Japan. During that visit, the India-Japan relationship was upgraded to a special strategic and global partnership. Guided by the strong political will on both sides, the partnership has made significant progress in the last few years, covering the entire gamut of mutual engagement, as witnessed in the growing convergence of our political, strategic, and economic interests. The last summit that was held between our two countries was in Japan in 2018, and since then, of course, a lot has transpired, including the COVID-19 pandemic. So today's summit is taking place after a reasonably long gap of 3.5 years. It has, in that sense, that we have given the gap that is there, the leadership has had an opportunity to take stock and review the relationship in some detail and chart the course for future actions taking into account regional, global situation. This is an important relationship, not only bilaterally, but also for peace, stability, and development of the Indo-Pacific region and the world at large. The visit has many firsts, and I'll just take you through some of them. This is the first meeting of the two leaders since Prime Minister Kishida took office last year in October. Significantly, this has been Prime Minister Kishida's first visit outside of Japan. And if you recall at the press conference, he also said that he had made it a point that his first visit outside of Japan would be to India. This is the first for India. This is the first incoming visit of a Prime Minister at the level of head of state or government in this year, 2022. This year also marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Japan. And you're also aware that Japan is hosting the next Quad Leaders Summit in the coming months. In terms of the program, Prime Minister Kishida arrived in New Delhi this afternoon. Both Prime Ministers then arrived at Hyderabad House for talks. There was a restricted session between the two Prime Ministers, which was followed by delegation-level talks. Given the scale and level of India-Japan economic engagement, a business meeting was also held, which was attended by the two Prime Ministers. You would have also been you would have been there at the press engagement by the two Prime Ministers and seen that several agreements have been concluded. The two leaders have also issued a joint statement, and these details will be available with you shortly. This is a joint statement that was signed between the two leaders, and Prime Minister Kishida will be leaving tomorrow morning. In this visit, the two leaders had substantive discussions and outcomes commensurate with the depth and expanse of India's engagement with Japan. On the bilateral side, the two prime ministers had discussed the entire range of areas, including economic cooperation, cooperation for the development of the northeastern region of India, digital cooperation, skills development, which is in particular area of focus. As two powers, major powers in the Indo-Pacific region, the prime ministers also had detailed discussions on regional and global issues. Both leaders concurred that our defense and security ties have strengthened over the last few years, and we are increasingly comfortable in engaging with each other, with other like-minded partners in various regional and multilateral fora for achieving our shared objectives. In terms of outcomes, as I mentioned, the joint statement was signed between the two prime ministers. We also concluded 3 agreements, which are the first is a memorandum of cooperation on cyber security. This is an umbrella agreement for information sharing, capacity building programs, and cooperation in the area of cyber security. The second was a memorandum of cooperation in the field of sustainable urban development. This actually expands on the agreement, the MOU that was signed in 2007, and includes new areas of cooperation. New areas include smart cities development, affordable housing, urban flood management, sewerage, intelligent transport management system. And the third was a memorandum of cooperation on wastewater management. And this really is a new technology that the Japanese have introduced, which is called Jokasu technology, which is essentially used in areas where sewage infrastructure has not yet been developed and involves a large tank for decentralized wastewater treatment. We also concluded 7 loan agreements for official development assistance. These are in areas of connectivity, healthcare, water supply, and sewerage. And the total worth of this overseas development assistance is around rupees 20,400 crores for the period 2021-22. So they're quite significant from the areas they cover and also the quantum involved. An important decision that the two prime ministers took was to set an enhanced investment target of 5 trillion Japanese yen as public and private investment in India from Japan over the next 5 years. You're aware that it was in 2014 when Prime Minister visited Japan that the two prime ministers then had set a target of 3.5 trillion yen. And that target has been surpassed. And I think the fact that the two leaders have decided to go in for this enhanced target is really a measure of the performance in terms of the investments, incoming investments by Japan in India, and is also a sign of the level of cooperation in the economic domain that the two countries enjoy. Now, to further encourage more Japanese companies, including MSMEs, to invest in India, the two sides also concluded a roadmap for industrial competitiveness partnership. This involves cooperation in micro, small, and medium enterprises sector. Supply chain issues is also a focus of this roadmap. Given the belief that we need to tap into all kinds of energy sources to meet the requirement of sustainable economic growth and addressing climate change commitments, we have also announced a clean energy partnership. This partnership will be implemented through the existing energy dialogue, which was established in 2007, and will enable cooperation in areas such as electric vehicles, including batteries, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, development of solar energy, hydrogen, ammonia, etc. The objective is to encourage manufacturing in India, creation of resilient and trustworthy supply chains in these areas, as well as fostering collaboration in research and development. As you're aware, government has recently announced a green hydrogen policy. The Clean Energy Partnership announced today fits in with the objectives of that overall scheme. Another area of cooperation, as you know, is the development of the Northeast region. Japan has been an important partner of ours in that regard. And it was in 2017 that an Act East Forum was established between our two countries to coordinate development projects in the Northeast region. Today, as part of this cooperation, the two sides have launched a sustainable development initiative for the Northeast region of India. And this includes cooperation in areas such as connectivity, healthcare, agro-industries, and disaster management. It also includes an initiative for strengthening bamboo value chain in the Northeast, which will help in the development of bamboo value chain. Essentially, bamboo is an important plant in the Northeast. It has a lot of commercial spin-offs, and this project and this cooperation is expected to bring in benefits to the Northeast region. An important aspect of our economic partnership is trade. We have made progress, as just before the visit, both sides agreed on work plans for the import of Japanese apples to India and the export of Indian mangoes to Japan. Today, both sides have made further progress by concluding amendments to our bilateral Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, one of which will allow for enhanced export of a fish called surimi to Japan. After the talks, as I mentioned, both the Prime Ministers attended a business event. This has been a regular feature in India-Japan summits, given the depth of our economic cooperation. At today's business event, an agreement was signed for the setting up of an electric vehicles plant and a battery manufacturing plant in Gujarat by Maruti Suzuki. Another agreement was signed on vehicle scrapping between Gujarat government and Maruti Suzuki Toyotsu. The total quantum of investment involved is around 10,400 crores, and the auto sector is one of the vibrant areas of economic cooperation between India and Japan. Skill development, as I mentioned, is an important focus of the two countries. Japanese companies have established some Japan-India Institutes of Management for skilling of Indian workers. We have established so far 19 of such institutes, but the 20th Japan-India Institute of Management will also be opened in Gujarat by Maruti Suzuki. It augurs well for capacity development of our skilled workers and our cooperation in the manufacturing sector. I'm confident that more companies from Japan will follow suit in the coming years. As I mentioned, Prime Minister Kishida will be leaving tomorrow morning. He would be leaving for Japan, but he would also on his en route be visiting another country, I'm told, in Southeast Asia. We are confident that this annual summit and such substantive outcomes in our ties will definitely deepen our existing cooperation.
Thank you very much, sir, for the comprehensive overview. I would now open the floor for questions. Please introduce yourself and the organization before we start taking questions. I saw your hand first. Please go ahead.
Hi, Smita Sharma, contributing editor for India Ahead. Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister actually refrained from making any comments directly about Ukraine in his initial remarks at the press statement, but the Japanese Prime Minister did make a point about it and said that he discussed with the Prime Minister about how to have a united stand on the issue. Can you elaborate on the nature of the discussions on the Ukrainian crisis? And given India's stand at the UN, with the reports coming in, India looking at buying discounted oil from Russia, has it become a strong point of divergence with the other Quad members at this point?
Yeah, Siddhant.
Hi, sir, Siddhant from Beyond. My question is about the Chinese aggressiveness. How much that was point of discussion between the two leaders when we saw the Japanese Prime Minister mentioning about the South China Sea during his press statement?
Sir, I'm Akhilesh Suman from Sunset TV. Earlier there was a virtual Quad meeting, and now it is a face-to-face summit between India and Japan. And I heard Prime Minister of Japan is telling that both India and Japan should try for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. So, sir, other than this, what were the point of convergence between India and Japan on the issue of Ukraine?
I saw one more hand here. No, done? Yeah. Okay.
This is Yesh Seri from the New Indian Express. My question is the same, on Ukraine. what is India's stand likely to be, because we've been neutral up till now. And also Monday, there's going to be a virtual meeting with Scott Morrison. This issue is likely to come up again. So what is India's stand?
If I just request focus our questions today on the India-Japan, but
Just
okay.
continue.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else on this round? Otherwise, so may I floor to you? Sir?
Well, as I mentioned, both leaders had an opportunity to exchange views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. We also had both restricted and delegation level talks. Ukraine issue did come up during these discussions, and both sides definitely had exchanged perspectives on this and had a fairly good exchange of views on the issue. Obviously, this issue is an important issue at a global level. It is an issue which is important for both our countries as well, and from that perspective, we had some good exchanges. Let me just try and summarize what the broad sense of that discussion was. Essentially, the Prime Minister expressed their seriousness about the ongoing conflict and the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, assessed its broader implications, particularly for the Indo-Pacific region. They emphasized that the contemporary global order had been built on the UN Charter, international law, and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. They underscored the importance of safety and security of nuclear facilities in Ukraine and acknowledged active efforts by the IAEA towards it. They reiterated their call for an immediate cessation of violence and noted that there was no other choice but the path of dialogue and diplomacy for the resolution of the conflict. The leaders affirmed that they would undertake appropriate steps to address the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Now, you also, I think, Smita mentioned the Quad. It is true that there was a Quad virtual summit during which the Ukraine summit was the Ukraine issue was discussed. You would have seen from the readout of that summit, which is something that all four countries had released, was that these discussions were useful in converging various viewpoints, and clearly, as far as the Quad was concerned, the points and elements that I just mentioned in the context of India-Japan talks were really the points that were taken up at the Quad. So there is a similarity, and that convergence continues in terms of how our four countries see it. I think other questions are also similar. So in a certain sense, what I've given you is an encapsulation of what was discussed on the Ukraine issue by the two leaders. Now, as far as Siddhant's question on China is concerned, in the discussions, the issue of China did come up. Both countries did inform each other of their perspectives. We did inform the Japanese side about the situation in Ladakh, the attempts at the massing of troops, attempts at multiple transgressions, and also the fact that we were holding talks with China on the border-related issues and the recent issues in Ladakh. We also made it clear that until and unless we had a resolution of the issues involved, there was peace and tranquility in the border areas, we could not consider the relationship to be business as usual, and normalcy in the relationship would depend on progress on the issues that we are discussing. The Japanese Prime Minister also briefed our Prime Minister on Japan's own perspective vis-a-vis the East and South China Seas. And you will see some of that reflected in the joint statement that would be issued shortly.
I guess any further round question? Okay. We'll take the last round here.
Maha Siddiqui from CNN News 18. Sir, follow up to the answer on Ukraine. Was there anything specific asked of India with regards to sanctions, say for instance, because Japan is also aligned with the West on the sanctions on Russia, and specifically in the oil sector, since we are getting discounted oil from Russia now?
Microphone there, please. The microphone's next to you.
My name is Baba from Nikkei newspaper. So can I confirm two things? So first, regarding Russian invasion of Ukraine, so I believe Indian government is keep on saying diplomatic dialogue is the only way to resolve the situation. So has this Indian stance changed since today's summit, or still is it same or not? And second, so is there any plan for India to cooperate with to Japan or US and European country to take action against Russian?
Any other questions? Okay, so thank you, sir. That's the last one.
Yeah, well, no, as I said, I mean, the discussions on Ukraine covered the issues that I just, conveyed to you. It was essentially, I think, the fact that, cessation of violence is an important factor for both countries. The fact that diplomacy and dialogue is important. I think this is the point you raised. The fact that humanitarian assistance is an element that both our countries believe in, and we are all also engaged in that. Japan announced that they had allocated $100 million for humanitarian assistance. We informed Japan that we have supplied 7 different tranches of humanitarian assistance consisting of medicines, blankets, sleeping mats, etc., worth 90 tons to Ukraine and the countries neighboring Ukraine to deal with the influx of displaced persons and refugees. And so in the conversation was on those lines. I don't think we went into the issues that you raised, Maha. And I think, whatever you need to know is available in the joint statement, and I think the two countries have a position which is reflected in the statement signed by the two prime ministers. So I think that sort of gives you a sense of a lot of what was taken up in this important summit.
Thank you very much, sir, for answering those questions. I also like to thank the presence of our ambassador to Japan, who's here, Shri Sanjay Kumar Verma, as well as Additional Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Shri Naveen Srivastav. Thank you all for joining us for the late hour. As you can imagine, the talks were longer, as always, than planned. And thank you for being here. Good evening. Namaskar.
Thank you.